Okay, so we will now go over more on tools and tactics of building value, as mentioned in the previous section, is um, value in what we're working on as a sales team or as a salesperson is the perception of that. So there's auxiliary tactics and tools that you can put into place outside of the value that your product directly provides. So those tools and tactics are sense appeal. We did go over this when building trust, but it's in a different manner, which I'm going to go over in a moment. Liking the prospect and who you're trying to sell to, if they like you, right? Simply put, if they like you, um, but it might not be as easy to understand unless you put it into practice. Again, I will go over this in a moment. Attraction and idolization, as well as convenience. Oh, and sorry, scarcity and repercussion. So here are the five areas that you can put into place, or tools and tactics you put into place to amplify value. So next section, sense appeal. So when it came to sense appeal when building trust, we talked specifically about how you present yourself. Um, in dressing nice, smelling good, right? You have a image to protect, and that helps build trust subconsciously to your prospect. Now, when it comes to sense appeal relating to value, I'm going to read this out loud here. Is it's going to be focusing on amplification of all senses to bring auxiliary value in doing business with you. Okay, and I will try to drive a lot of these senses into examples that you can probably relate to. Um, now, when being advertised a product or service, and we'll when it comes to taste, right? So this is the senses that we're all aware of: taste, touch, smell, hearing, and seeing. Um, when we For example, if you go to a mall and they provide you with a sample taste of the product itself, um, that is a sample of trying the product, yes, but also getting an idea of or stimulating a sense to also procure or buy that product that product, which is a plate at a mall, for example. Now, you also can see this sometimes if you go to a conference and someone provides you with something to eat or a snack that may have nothing to do with the product, but again, we are stimulating a sense and we drive subconsciously value to who is providing that stimulation. So again, tasting something you can eat, something you can try, right? Tactility, touch. Um, Comfort, right? So if you are presenting to somebody, making sure that your prospect is comfortable. If we're using the example of a car dealership, make sure that the seat where they're at is comfortable, right? Tactility. That's essentially an alternative word for just touch, and make sure that AC feels good. If they feel comfortable, right? This is also building auxiliary value outside of the product you were trying to sell. We're almost Pavloving the prospect, right? And saying, I feel comfortable with this person. They're filling my belly. Things like this is going to help amplify value. Scent, smelling good, straightforward, right? You don't want to smell bad, but if they, again, tying subconsciously, if the area smells good, if you smell, you're wearing a cologne or perfume that smells good, hearing some music, right? You got to make sense of the environment that you're providing, but music, also talking, this is also hearing you, is talking at a tone that is comforting, right? But also not just comforting when at all times. Sometimes you have to come off as confident as well. So you have to make sure that what they hear, again, when you're appealing to a sense, makes sense in building value in whatever way you would like to, right? So comfort or being comfortable or confident in what you're saying and the tone is also stimulating a sense. And then visual, also the same as we said in building from a sense appeals perspective, building on trust. Visual, are you presented well? Is your hair done? Are you dressed, nice? Again, we've been in an era of remote work, right? And it's very important to present yourself in a manner that you don't look like you just woke up. You put yourself together almost as if you were working in an office, right? And some of us are doing that, but making sure that you present well. Okay. So sense appeal, again, tying to value or amplifying it in a way that we're subconsciously training our prospect that this is a person that we would like to be around, that we feel comfortable with. Okay. So for the next slide here is liking. You don't have to push yourself to be liked, I want to start off with that in the sales process. This is more in when you doing your research. I've shared this with you earlier in this e-learning course. Is that you need to do research on your prospect, right? So I'm going to provide the definition of this. People like doing business with those that they like being around, speaking with, and learning about. Okay. So we're doing the research when you go on someone's LinkedIn 15 minutes before the call, or if you have the opportunity to do some research if you're meeting them in person, also probably be on LinkedIn as well. Sometimes you don't have that time to do research, but just use context clues, right? So, um, again, people that buy like to buy from people they like. Now, how they like being around. You gotta read, and this is something that has to be in practice, right? If you're a person that kind of struggles with interpersonal communication and you find it difficult to beat around the bush and small talk, this is just practice. You're not going to do this right away, and you don't necessarily have to force it out. But it do people do buy, like as I said this a couple times, they like to buy from people they like. So if you take a look at someone that and again, using LinkedIn, this is a tool I often look at or use, is they're into a specific, they like to fundraise for youths or kids that have that are disadvantaged in the community, right? So you can bring that up in a conversation. Hey, I just looked at your LinkedIn. Just tell me about that, right? And the fact that you show interest, right, into what they're doing. Again, do it authentically. Just don't say, "Oh, that's cool. You like to help out kids. I like to help kids too." No, do a little bit of research. Come off as authentic. Um, when you find interest in someone's passion, you don't might not necessarily like that interest, or just you just want to learn about it. People like to be around you, right? They like to, or maybe not like to be around you necessarily right away, but they like the fact that you show interest and you're building that credibility of being someone they want to be around. To speaking with, right? So the subject material, again, doing research, um, speaking about something they may be interested in is going to help build subconsciously. Again, a lot of this is a subconscious building, right? These are tools that you're training people to say, all right, not only the product and service is something that I'm interested, but I like to be around this person. I like to talk to them. I like to learn about them. So speaking with, keep the conversation bilateral. Don't be the only person speaking the entire time. Show interest in what they're doing, and also mix it up. Again, I've elaborated on this course is that you want to be authentic. So don't go to the go-to conversation points. How's the weather over there? Right? That's common when we're talking speaking remotely. How's the weather on your side of of the world or side of of the country? Mix it up. You know, Sometimes if you want, hey, do you have any kids? Kind of like branch out and being authentic and having just engaging conversations with them. And again, you also want to gear conversations into business, as rightfully so. Don't spend half of your meeting with small talk, but just building that rapport, right? And again, a lot of that, something to take away from this one section, is do your research on your prospect if you can. And if you're meeting with someone remote, you can always do research on them. Even if they don't have LinkedIn, there is something online that you can learn about them. YouTube videos. I've met with prospects who had course or not courses, but they had a press release on something, a product or something like that they had on YouTube. I learned about them, and even learning about how they speak. Do I speak fast with them? Do I speak slow? There's a lot you can learn on just doing research. And the last part of liking is learning about. So, you know, as you're speaking and you're having that back to forth conversation, this will naturally come out, but they would want to learn a little bit more about you over time, right? Again, sales is not about you. So let's put this in. Let me make this very apparent to you, um, and I mean this in the most productive way. Is most people, 99% of people, don't want to hear about too much about you, right? So they might want to learn about you after the second or third engagement. They learn that you have kids. They learn that you just came in from vacation. But all these components tie into if people like you and how do you grow that, right? The bottom line, this is important. So we do confuse as being funny and outgoing as a direct correlation to being liked. That's not always true. It can be, right? It does help to be a little humorous and make light of situations and being outgoing and talking, but that's not always the case. So just for those of you that are listening that do struggle with interpersonal skills that may not, capture these clues, like it's not so much about that, right? It's having that conversation, being almost, again, being someone that they want to be around. Okay, and you don't have to be outgoing necessarily to do so. Um, so next slide here, attraction and idolization. Um, in the marketing and sales worlds, we all see it, we all know it. Attraction, right? So physical attraction is an influencer in perceived value. People want to talk to people and see people that are attractive. That is a natural human reaction, right? Now, I want to address this, right? It might sound vain, but I want to address it in sales because it is true, okay? And how you can influence this, right? I think, again, as I mentioned to you, sense appeals, putting yourself together as you can, but also just taking care of yourself. Subconsciously, buyers look at people that are selling to them if they take care of themselves. So physical attraction, that's pretty straightforward if they're physically attractive. And sometimes people are a little bit more attractive than others. I'm not going to go into that whole concept. I just want to address it. Okay. But also taking care of yourself, regardless of, how you perceive yourself as being attractive or not. Taking care of yourself, going exercising, going to the gym, eating right as best as possible. Buyers do see these things, right? If you don't take care of yourself, you most likely won't take care of me as a customer. That is likely not true, but again, we are talking about the subconscious. Okay, so physical attraction and just physical care. I don't want to necessarily put attraction only, but care, just caring for yourself. We are training people that are buying from us. What is it going to be like working with you? Are you caring for yourself? You probably care for the me as a customer as well. So that helps amplify value, even though there's might not be any direct correlation between the two. And then idolization, being a subject matter expert in your sector and what you sell, you are going to have some tie-in to the person you are buying, right? So if it's software for human resources, and you know a lot about the sector, about human resources as a whole, or if you're selling a project management tool, and you know a lot about project management, and even if you gone out as a salesperson, got a certification, your buyer is going to idolize that, right? They're going to look at that if they don't have it, or even if they do, if they have a project management PMP certification. This helps amplify value, right? An idol is just, as as you see the definition here, is being perceived as someone that you like to be similar to or share traits with, right? You look up to that person. So being a subject matter expert will help build on this idolization. But I would try to challenge you all to kind of think about how you can amplify that as well. Moving forward, I'm going to kind of go through these last two kind of quickly here. Convenience. So making sure that your product and service is convenient. Take a look at Uber. The idea of Uber essentially is bringing food to you quicker, and not having to drive anywhere. And delivery that's kind of guaranteed. So perception, not perception, but it's just making actions essentially easier to perform from a buyer standpoint. Give it as simply as possible. And you can look at an existing business model and just figure out how can you build the convenience behind it. And that can be something that's your primary value proposition, right? And the last section, scarcity and repercussion. Taking away the access to certain things if there's a finite amount of product or service. The idea of fear of missing out is a very strong driver in helping people purchase something and build value on it. So you can apply a scarcity incrementally and saying, listen, the product is always available, but you might have to wait another month for the next stock to come in. Like it's not always available, but taking away some parts of your product or service if they don't act now helps build value as well. So yeah, that's an overview of the tools and tactics that you can put into place for value, and I'll see you in the next section.